Good afternoon and welcome to the first Asian Impact webinar for 2021. A very happy new year to you all. For those of you who are new to the Asian Impact webinars, these showcase Asian Development Bank research in action alongside many experts. Today, those experts will be discussing online platforms. Now, none of you, of course, especially in today's world, are a stranger to these online platforms. We get deliveries of various kinds. We use them to keep in touch with friends, family, and colleagues. Indeed, we're using one of them today, one that perhaps this time a year ago, none of us had ever used before. But how can we be maximizing online platforms to really promote inclusive economic growth as we recover from COVID-19? We're going to be hearing from a number of experts discussing the topic. We'll hear from Rizky Kramadibrata. He is the president of GRAB Indonesia. Reiko Aoki is a commissioner of the Japan Fair Trade Commission. And Arsenio Balisacan is the chairman of the Philippine Competition Commission. Welcome to you all. Thanks for joining us today. We are open to your questions as well, so please do put them in the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll get to as many as we can in the 1 hour that is allotted to us. First of all, I want to hand over to Yasuyuki Sawada. He is the chief economist here at the Asian Development Bank. He's also the Director General of the Economic Research and Regional Cooperation Department. He's going to lay out some of the research that ADB has done in this area. Yasu, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the nice introduction, Karen. Good day, everyone. In order to set the stage for our discussions today, I'd like to share a few slides summarizing the role of digitalization and all online platforms. So next slide, COVID-19 pandemic has dimmed economic prospect. Even with the massive policy responses of ADB's developing member countries, ADB projected developing Asia's GDP to contract by 0.4% last year 2020. Our research indicates without COVID-19 pandemic, number of poor in developing Asia would have continued to decline, as you can see from left chart. However, the pandemic is threatening to reverse this continuous poverty reduction trend. And I'd like to also point out COVID-19 put a severe strain on firms, especially micro, small, and medium-scale enterprises, MSMEs. According to ADB's rapid survey in Indonesia, Laos, PDR, Philippines, and Thailand endorse this severe impact on SMEs. As you can see from right, we published a report last year. And next slide. I'd like to discuss, in spite of this current difficult situation, we can claim Asia is still central in digitalization, which could drive its growth and recovery in sustainable manner, because the opportunity for growth of digital platform in Asia are still very, very immense. This chart shows the per capita spending on y-axis on the digital spending, and horizontal axis, x-axis is a user to population ratio, penetration ratio of digitalization. Bubble size denoting number of digital market users in millions. Compared to the US and Euro areas, we can see developing Asia is still located in the middle. That means this region has a long way to go in terms of these two indicators, market penetration and spending. Opportunity for digital market growth are still immense, which could support robust COVID-19 recovery in Asia. And next slide, actually showing indeed COVID-19 outbreak has given digital platform as opportunity to contribute. The left chart presents the result of a McKinsey survey, which shows that B2B companies became more digitalized after the outbreak of pandemic. And the right chart shows a net change in online B2C purchases, which jumped in May last year. So actually we observe this immense opportunity is indeed materializing during the COVID-19, after COVID-19 pandemic last year. So next chart, finally, I'd like to point out, this is a final point, but not least, I'd like to mention data is a core element of evidence-based policy making. While existing data based on a survey of households and businesses conducted by the government have a great value, limitations have become apparent during the COVID-19 pandemic because of low frequency with a significant time lag and not granular. So in this respect, big data from platform economies has played and will continue to play a critical role in policy making for COVID-19 response and recovery. This is because such data, big data from platform economy or even administrative data from the government tracks government economic activity at a very high frequency granular level. These sets of information will be indispensable for evidence-based policy making. And final slide, next slide, summarize my initial point. COVID-19 has dimmed economic prospect in Asia and the world's put severe strain on firms, especially MSMEs, and reverted gains in poverty reduction. Secondly, because Asia is central in digitalization, digital platforms have the potential to make the post-pandemic recovery inclusive and sustainable. And finally, but not least, granular data and rigorous platform research are indispensable for effective evidence-based policy making. That concludes my initial presentation. I'm looking forward to joining this exciting panel today. Thank you. Thank you very much. Over to you, Karen.
Thanks very much, Yasu. Obviously, yes, a lot of changes in the digital space, a lot of opportunities in the digital space, but COVID-19, I think, has changed the way that we work and the way that the platforms are work and the consumers' interaction with those platforms as well. I'd like to toss over to Rizky, please. I mean, you come at this very much, Rizky, from a practitioner's point of view. Could you talk a little bit about, how you've been seeing the impacts of COVID manifesting themselves and really what you see as the opportunities?
Hi, Karen, and hi, everyone. I hope my voice is clear. So good afternoon to everyone. Thank you, Karen, of course. I would like to share my remarks as well as the status as well of Grab and how that the fact on how this pandemic has created an unequal crisis in some sort. And of course, we know that the most vulnerable, it's actually like informal workers and small businesses are the ones that hardest hit. Their presence is very important, but often overlooked, yeah? So they carry actually 60% of our Indonesia's GDP. It's quite a sizable numbers. And 97% of all workers in Indonesia depends on MSMEs and gig workers for their livelihoods. But of course, these times are hard for them, everyone, of course, but especially for MSMEs, as Sawada-san has correctly mentioned as well. We even have a research that shows that nearly 50% of offline MSMEs have somewhat closed down because of this pandemic. So those that have an online presence, of course, are doing a little better, but they still need a lot more help. Back to Grab, yeah, businesses like Grab, of course, must step up and do our part as well. We should boost their resilience. We can help prevent more job losses and put the economy in a stronger positions to recover. And when we talk specifically about Indonesia, this is a kind of unique country, a quite large country. We have over 17,000 islands in an area spanning about 1,900 million square kilometers. How can we enable digital and financial inclusions and open up possibilities for everyone to move into the middle class? And partnerships, of course, partnerships and strategic alliance are the key here. And during the pandemic alone, we realized that we need to form partnerships. We have formed over 40 partnerships with central and local government in Indonesia to help as many people and businesses possible. We are here talking about moms and pops owners. For example, in Jayapura, that's a far eastern part of Indonesia. Also traditional wet market in hundreds of cities. And then another one, fisheries in Ambon. Ambon is an island, island in central Indonesia. And of course, this includes also agricultural farmers across Indonesian archipelago. Over the last few months, we have welcomed more than 500,000 MSMEs in addition to the existing ones, and all of them coming online for the first time. That is very interesting, yeah. And then when we talk about inclusivity, we need to pay attention to different stakeholders with different needs. Grab as an everyday everything app initiated and introduced over 50 programs and solutions. And these solutions are catering different needs for different segments, including, for example, women. Grab is home for thousands of women who are working as our delivery and driver partners, kiosk agents, merchants, and food and mart merchants as well. Another one, also traditional businesses, for example. We added 7,000 traditional markets to the Grab maps, enabling them to be in our digital platforms. We also a home for the disabled. Grab has onboarded over 1,200 disabled driver partners and agent partners in our platform. And these are the ones that declared that they are disabled. There might be more, and we're confident that that should be more. Another one is for the one that lost their jobs. They can join as individual Grab kiosk agents offering financial and digital products. And these services are needed by approximately 170 million Indonesians who do not have banking or limited access to financial inclusions. And last but not least, for rural areas, Grab is serving more than 500 cities spanning across the country and empowering over, in total, about 6 million of partners and merchants in Indonesia. And again, in times like this, the importance of economic resilience definitely hits home. Without it, people that hit hardest may never fully recover. So may allow me to actually convey a story, a quite heartwarming story from one of our merchants in Yogyakarta. It's a city or area in central Java. Mr. Andromeda Sindoro, he is the owner of MSME. The name of the MSME is Sweet Sunday Ice Cream. It's an ice cream supplier for hotels and catering in central Java and Yogyakarta. Mr. Andromeda, like many of these people, saw his business plummet by approximately 80% when the pandemic first hit. But he quickly pivoted from a B2B concepts to a B2C business by joining GrabFood. His sales increased now by 85% within 2 months. And today, thanks God, all 25 of his staff remain employed. And as his business grown back up, Mr. Andromeda has empowered his suppliers, cattle farmers, to keep supplying milk for his ice cream. Also, another point through this opportunity, I would like to affirm also our commitment to support the Indonesian government in its vaccine program across the country. Conducting vaccinations programs gradually are critical steps toward the economic recovery of our nations. Today is actually the start of the vaccinations in Indonesia, and our government has committed to making vaccines free for all Indonesians. However, vaccines delivery will not be an easy task, we know, considering our sprawling archipelago. But we have been working closely with the Indonesian government on multiple fronts since the first time the virus outbreak. And now we hope to be able to play another role in the COVID-19 vaccine program to every Indonesian in a secure and safe way by, of course, using our technology and platform reach. Grab also sincerely requesting to the government to consider our Grab partners, in which are the MSMEs here, to receive early access to the vaccine so they can continue to play a valuable role in helping communities and reviving the economy. We know and we believe that they should be prioritized because of the essential services they provide and the critical role they will play throughout this pandemic. We believe that in spite of all that the pandemic has thrown at us, we can still collectively find new and better ways to push ourselves forward and overcome these challenges together. While we are here to talk about inclusive growth, we need to remember that we are doing this because we are helping each other to overcome the crisis. Let's continue to drive inclusive growth together. Thank you for listening, and thank you for the time.
Thank you very much, Rizky, and thank you for the story about Mr. Andromeda. I think it probably exemplifies what a lot of micro and small and medium-sized enterprises are going through. We may need to ask if he delivers internationally, of course, but I think that's a bigger question. Reiko, if I could come to you, please. I am seeing some questions coming in, which is absolutely fantastic, but I wanted to give everybody here a chance to say a few words about some of their topics of their expertise areas. Reiko, if I could please move to you. We've heard from the Indonesia experience. What about the Japan experience? Is there anything that the region can learn from Japan's experience in online platforms?
Thank you, Karen. Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear. Thank you very much.
I really appreciate this opportunity to share the Japanese experience with you, and I prepared some slides. Next slide, please. So first of all, what have online platforms done? The first two speakers have already gone through the essentials, I think, but let me just reformulate for what I prepared. So the online platforms have moved the economy, made access to the internet equal access to society and economy. And the role of the individual citizen, I think, has changed immensely. Individual citizens are not just consumers anymore, they're seller of goods and seller of services on Grab, for instance. And role of platforms is both matching and exchange between seller and buyers, but also regarding information, they can be a buyer and seller of information in exchange for providing goods and services themselves. Next slide, please. So given this frame, understanding of online economy, what is necessary for inclusive growth? Well, online platforms provide both opportunity for inclusive growth, and there are also dangers of leaving part of society behind. The opportunity comes from individuals being able to directly sell goods and services online. Access to internet is essential. And there are challenges because they're individuals. For instance, individuals are always going to have trouble gathering as much information as platforms or big firms that might be on the platform, for instance. And also they lack bargaining power. That is, they're at an inferior bargaining position. And of course, informational asymmetry is one source, but for instance, access to financial resources would be one. If you're out of a job and you're desperate for work, you don't have time to wait around and negotiate a good deal. You take whatever you can, and sometimes that can be not such a good deal. And that's the danger and challenge for individuals when they go on the online platform. Next slide, please. So what can we do? Well, JFTC has made some efforts which might be a reference for our colleagues. First of all, consumers and bargaining position. In the Japanese anti-monopoly law, we have always had the concept of abuse of superior bargaining position, which has been applied to small and medium businesses. But we felt that now that consumers are directly engaged in the economy online, that this could be a very useful tool for protecting consumers, particularly regarding personal information. So we've expanded the abuse of superior bargaining position and written new guidelines for consumers online. Freelance workers, as Rizky already mentioned, people can be laid off or be unemployed, And getting on the platform is a wonderful way to make up for their lost income as freelance workers. But there have been concerns that they were not being treated, they might be treated unfairly. And because of this concern, JFDC convened a study group to study the issue. We also did a survey of freelancers and those that are engaged with freelancers. And we're in the final stages of preparing guidelines for securing fair business environment for freelancers. And we hope that this will help for inclusive recovery from the pandemic. Equally important as freelancers is new businesses that respond to new needs in the with COVID and post-COVID economy. But again, startups often are novices in the business community, and there's concern that, again, they'll be treated unfairly. So we have conducted a survey on businesses' practice of startups, and we're also in the final stages of preparing guidelines for open innovation with startups. That will be ready soon based on the survey. And finally, with online platforms in general, we believe that because of the fast-moving pace of the technology and the business models, it's very important that we first come up with what we know, the fundamental principles that we hope that the stakeholders can use as a benchmark of how digital platform business should operate for the benefit of all stakeholders. And we're also in the final stage of preparing a report on digital advertising, of course, where online platforms play a very important part. Next slide, please. So from our short experience, short but quite a rich experience with online platforms, what might be the principles of inclusive growth in online platforms? We conducted a lot of surveys and guidelines because the technologies are new and the relationships of the stakeholders is new. Fact-finding and mutual understanding among stakeholders is very, very important. Cooperation among government agencies and regulators is also very important because online platforms affect cross-traditional boundaries. For instance, with online retailing, it's internet, which is the Ministry of Communication. Retailing is the Ministry of Economic Trade and Industry. Freelancers would include Ministry of Health, Welfare, and Labor. So JFTC has worked with them for a combination of ex ante and ex post intervention. Again, because of the speed of the technology and the business models, it's very important to do something ex ante. If it didn't work properly, we should step in ex post and correct whatever went wrong. And of course, international cooperation is essential because online platforms are global, and many of the good and bad effects are from online platforms is common across countries. And most important, exchanging information at a venue such as this symposium is very, very important for a truly inclusive growth with online platforms. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Reiko. Thank you. I think you mentioned a whole host of issues that I think that we will come to later in the discussion, and hopefully through the Q&A on the right-hand side. Please post questions if you have any issues that you want to discuss or you want to hear from in terms of the things that Reiko or indeed anybody else has said. Arsenio, if I can come to you last, please. Reiko mentioned a whole host of challenges and constraints, issues to consider. From the Philippines perspective, what do you see as the key milestones to achieve, I guess, in terms of harnessing these online platforms for economic growth?
Okay, let me address that issue from a development perspective, and of course, citing a bit on the Philippine experience. Clearly, as Sawad-san has shown, the pandemic has accelerated the digital shifts. There are clearly huge benefits for countries, particularly including developing economies such as the Philippines, because these digital platforms have allowed economies of scale and network effects, also mentioned by Jorge-san, that potentially lead to lower transaction costs and information asymmetries. We have seen the effects of this by way of lower prices, increased market access, particularly for MSAs and physically disabled persons, including women, as well as for international trade. And of course, it increased labor flexibility. A survey, a 2018 survey of SMEs in Asia Pacific showed that most of the firms generated more than half of the revenues from e-commerce. They have used social media, and about 4/5 of them used emerging technologies to improve supply chain and distribution. But what we noted is that the existing market still dominated by established large enterprises. And this brings me to the point that developing economies, including the Philippines, face challenges in making the digital shift more inclusive. MSMEs and the poor suffer unequal access to digital platforms due primarily to poor connectivity. For example, penetration of high-speed broadband connection is low, primarily because of unstable, slow, and expensive internet connection. In the Philippines, for example, poor access to high-quality internet, or because of that poor access to high-quality internet, digitalization is largely constrained by low, high-speed broadband penetration, and the penetration is lagging behind neighboring middle-income countries. And 60% of the households do not have yet access to the internet. Apart from this, we have also the low awareness, low digital awareness and trust in digital services, such as fintech. Then on top of this, you have funding constraints as well, high innovation costs faced by SMEs. Still on top of this, you have skill mismatch in the labor market. The skills needed by an online platform economy are quite different from the skills, the existing skills of the labor force. Let me point out some examples. In the Philippines, as is well known, ranks quite high. It's 6 in the countries, ranked 6th among countries contributing to the global online workers. However, the type of work that Filipino workforce do is low value adding, because as a high proportion of these are in clerical and data entry work, compared with what you see, for example, in countries like Pakistan, China, of course, and even Vietnam and Indonesia, where you have a much higher proportion of those workers engaged in higher value adding segments of this economy, like in creative or media, multimedia sectors, in software development, and so on. So when the pandemic strike us, one thing that we know, and it's a common experience by many of the countries, particularly in developing countries, is that the services sector, it represents about 58% of our workforce, suffered the most simply because the nature of work is such that they are badly affected, adversely affected by the less demand for face-to-face jobs. And the ability to shift from on-site to work from home arrangements was far limited for low skilled or less educated workers, which are quite a high proportion of our total workforce. So what this means is that what we see is an exacerbation of existing inequalities. And without this proactive whole of government approach beyond the online platform, to fully harness digitalization as catalyst for inclusive recovery, you would see persistence of that inequality and perhaps exacerbation. And finally, I would like to note the importance of competition policy in our competition policy, the role that it plays in ensuring a more inclusive digital economy by increasing the affordability and quality of internet access, as well as ensuring that online platforms compete on a level playing field. I can stop there for now, and I can elaborate on this some more later. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Arsenio. We are seeing some questions come in. As I said, we'll delve into some of the topics, but the first one I'd like to respond to is from Tony. He says, and this is to Yasu, please. He's asking about whether we have disaggregated data for the pandemic's reversal of MSME gains, particularly in the Philippines.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for asking this question. Actually, as I briefly mentioned, we conducted a micro survey with MSMEs in a few countries, including the Philippines. And main findings published as COVID-19 impact on Philippine business. And this report is available on the website. So question, a quick answer is yes, we have a disaggregated data. And some few important findings. Number one is MSMEs, especially micro enterprises, continue to face a sharp drop in demand and the revenue. And also employment side, they have to do lots of employment cuts, especially micro enterprises. And also MSMEs, especially smaller ones, suffering from working capital shortages. And then we have a subjective assessment, what kind of policy measures they would like to have. And according to this survey, loan repayment and tax repayment remain top concerns for MSMEs. So policy measures and interventions providing, relaxing these issues would be really seems to be needed. So this is a quick findings from our MSME study, including the Philippines. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Yasu. Thanks, Yasu. Another very popular question we've got in is requesting some information, if perhaps we have to crowdsource this amongst us here, regarding the difference in digitalization and the use of online platforms across the region. Arsenio, you mentioned a few countries in your remarks a little bit earlier. And perhaps others have some inputs. Are we seeing different types of online platforms being used more or less in the region? Arsenio, could I come to you first and then perhaps afterwards to Reiko?
Are we seeing different online platforms?
Yeah, different kinds of online platforms being used in different countries.
Yes, I think
perspective on that.
Yeah, the sector is quite dynamic, and we see a lot of things happening. Obviously, the feature of this market, the online platform, is that the first mover advantage is key. So the challenge for those new ones, the innovators, is really to get into that market and acquire a sufficient scale to in terms of the number of riders or the number of sellers or buyers, so that they become attractive. And that's where I think competition policy comes in, because we want to ensure that innovation is not precluded. The barriers to entry are are eliminated, and so that first mover advantage should not be a permanent feature of these markets. Otherwise, inclusivity will not happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And we need to be thinking more than within our national boundaries, of course. These online platforms aren't just necessarily working within one country, they can work across borders as well. Reiko, could I turn to you? You've done a lot of studies over at the Commission. Any perspectives from your side in terms of who are the leaders, who are lagging, in what ways are different countries using online platforms? Are there any trends we're seeing?
My impression is JFDC itself has not done an international comparison. A good source actually is probably OECD, although OECD would be OECD countries. So maybe Sawada-sensei has no better information on this actually. But my impression is just looking at our close neighbors, for instance, Korea, who also has a very active platform, is that in Asia in particular, there are very many country-specific platforms. And I think it's because, well, there's the language issue, and also the online platforms are customizing themselves to the existing business models. How, for instance, I see Rizky is nodding his head, maybe he's agreeing, but how, I'm quite sure how Indonesians have always bought food from a restaurant is probably interactive with the restaurant is different from a typical Japanese would do, or how they will procure food, groceries. In Japan is very different from US, for instance, I know because I live there. And I think the platforms have adjusted to this. So even the global platforms, when they're in Japan, they act different. And also because they don't know the customs, there's room for domestic platforms to grow a decent amount, I think. And I get the impression, unlike Europe, where it's quite homogeneous, maybe Europeans would have a different opinion, but among Asian countries, we managed to keep our specific characteristics a little bit more. And the digital economy has come in before we become too homogeneous. And for that reason, the platforms are quite different, is my impression.
Yeah, interesting perspective that there are, things that are common to all of us, needs that are common to all of us, but needs that are very local as well. Rizky, do you want to come in? Grab is in a number of countries across Asia. Are you seeing any differences? And then I'll come back to you because we have another question about consumer behavior that I think you could answer as well.
Right. Thank you. So maybe I can speak on behalf of Indonesia in particular. Even Indonesia, we see some changes, like Reiko mentions also, and Arsenio also mentioned a little bit. As a super apps, we do deliver many services, including ride-hailing and food deliveries, and also other delivery services. As you can see, the customers' behavior changes as well. From maybe before the pandemic, it's more of we providing service to take customer from point A to point B to get what they want. But now it's more like instead they staying at point A, and what we do is mainly to deliver what he or she needs from point B, delivered to his points, basically like that. But to address that, we need some changes to address concern, because number one concern from the consumers' mind, of course, number one is health protocol, because they're becoming more and more health conscious. We did some changes. For example, we introduced a service to our transport, which we call Grab Protect. This is a special 2- and 4-wheeled fleet equipped with partitions and hand sanitizers, and even a mask selfie technology to enforce health protocol. This gives more confidence for the customers as well. We introduced also no contact physical distancing rules for GrabFood and Grab Express driver partners. We also, during the pandemic, immediately we launched what is called GrabMart and Grab Assistance. We provide services in which customers can get their daily needs, daily goods, and delivered to their home. And all of this, we done it because we understand that millions of people and businesses, including our partners, are counting on us, while we all of us are actually adapting to this pandemic. And this is a force for good, and we really support it. Good also that I need to mention as well that the Indonesian government are actually really on board to this concept as well. We have a government supported, in fact, it's a government initiated program. In Indonesia, it's called Bangga Buatan Indonesia. But what it means is actually trying to onboard many small businesses into online platforms. So they're becoming more resilient, and they could adapt to the new situations. Then after that, we also doing a lot of not only onboarding, but also training and growth tools for them. So not only them joining the digital platforms, but they can really optimize their presence in digital world.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Rizky. Very important. A number of you mentioned unequal access to the platforms, either because of lack of access to the technology, to the internet, to the Wi-Fi, and so forth. Or I think it was Rizky, you mentioned that there are 170 million unbanked in Indonesia. So people are unable to use these online platforms because they don't have bank accounts, for example. So how do we make sure that everybody has access to these online platforms? What do we need to do? We have a question from Min Tambui. He's mentioning that one of the most vulnerable groups within society is, of course, the elderly. They tend to have less access, perhaps less interest, less knowledge about online platforms, the internet, and so forth. How can we bring in some of these groups into the digital economy, as it were? Yasu, do you have any quick thoughts? And then I'll go to Arsenio, Reiko, and Rizky as well.
Maybe can I go ahead?
Yasu,
Okay.
please go ahead.
Okay, I think yes, we have a ongoing research on impact of COVID-19 on the elderly, and older people disproportionately affected, and also this prolonged stay at home is taking a disproportionate toll on physical health and ability of older persons. So I think this is leading to deterioration of mental health as well as physical health. So we have this evidence. I think what to do is in abstract sense, I think it's three things are necessary. One is both suppliers and consumer side ICT access should be improved. So the poor, as well as elderly, poor, and those who are operating micro enterprises, improved affordability and access to ICT are very important, enabling online transactions. I think this is very core. In order to back up this, second point is ICT infrastructure as well as connectivity infrastructures are needed. Not only ICT, but also improving logistics and delivery infrastructure. That's really critical to to maximize the gain of platform economy, spill over to vulnerable group, including elderly people. And then at the same time, to some extent, capacity development in digital skills, capacity building in education and training and retraining. Sustainable development goals are listed lifelong learning as one of the goals. So I think even for elders, it's not too late to learn a little bit and acquire digital skills so that they can gain out of this flourishing digital platform transaction. So that's my response.
Thanks very much. Arsenio, do you want to jump in?
Yes. I think that from a developing country perspective, particularly in the Philippines, now I'm speaking about the Philippines, is that the single most critical constraint to wider adoption of digitalization technologies in the Philippines, really the quality of our internet services. So we really need to to have government as a whole address this issue of lack of investments or low levels of investment, both public and private, particularly the entry of private investments in the sector. And that means that we really have to undo a lot of things, regulations, policies that make the cost of doing business high in the country. That's one. And this, by the way, affects not only the elderly, but the broad segments of our population, including our capacity to adapt to online education. Now, the other thing that I was mentioning earlier is that looking at the initial effects of the pandemic on the labor force, it's clear that that education and the level of skills, the quality of skills that our population has at the moment is not quite the kind of skills that these new technologies, emergent technologies or need. So there's a lot of retooling, retraining, and reforms of our educational system that we need to do. And I think that our government has recognized these problems and working hard to address these issues. But again, I would like to emphasize the role of infrastructure development and with respect to ICT and related infrastructure, as well as policies and regulations inhibiting investments.
Thank you very much. I think, Reiko, you mentioned earlier the importance of making sure that all agencies, all ministries, perhaps within governments, coordinate on this. Harnessing these digital platforms, these online platforms, isn't the role just of, for example, the industry ministry, for example. And I think one issue that's come up here and is raised by Falguni Biswal is the need not only to ensure that people have access to these platforms as a consumer, but that those who are workers have the necessary protections and so forth. Could I ask you perhaps to speak to his question about how we balance the need to maintain flexibility and adaptability on the one hand and social protection on the other hand?
So social protection meaning?
Social protection, I think, meaning access to perhaps unemployment benefits, pensions, that kind of thing. Healthcare.
Okay. First of all, as you said, we need this coordination with among ministries, and actually the solution Japan's come up with is to establish a new digitalization agency. So that's one solution. And the feeling is because, as you asked, all sorts of social security, welfare services could be delivered online, and that would be a lot safer than people coming to the offices and lining up at the window. And actually, I wanted to say something about not inclusivity of senior citizens. So can I also answer that question?
Please do, please do. It's an open forum.
Well, particularly because Japan's an aging society. Pretty soon, almost half of the population is going to be above the age of 55. And because there is such a large group, I think Japan has been, it has been worthwhile to cater to people who are not online so far, but COVID-19 has made it unsafe not to go online. So now one thing we can do is to try to train the elderly, but I also think we should be more demanding to the online platforms and the digital instrument manufacturers. You know, I'm old enough to remember when we had OS, which is very, very difficult to use. And you really have to spend a week learning how to use your computer. But now we're in the day of Windows, where you buy a new product and you can use it immediately. And I don't know why the digital companies don't make it more senior friendly to cater to the senior citizens. And I think in Japan, because that group is so large, it's going to be worthwhile to do that. Sorry, I just wanted to appeal to the digital economy people that they really should, and it is their worthwhile, starting with Japan, to try to come up with new products and softwares and interface that are senior citizen friendly. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Ritsuki, you heard it here first. I'd like to stick with you if I can, because we have a question here about users of online platforms and the need for people to agree to terms and conditions that are long and technical and requiring people to just accept them all. The question is, how can we be sure that the terms and conditions are fair? Now, you're with Grab Indonesia, so I'm sure you can answer that one.
Thank you so much. So number one, it's we need to, people need to rest assured that we're all very well regulated. So definitely we are bounded by regulatory frameworks, especially on personal data privacy, in which we really need to honor. I know that with the fast number of services that growing in the digital economy and digital world, sometimes it's becoming, quite massive for people to absorb of the, of all the information that needs to be absorbed in one go. So I really suggest that people really take a look at the terms and conditions. However, they need to also to rest assured that all of us in the digital economies are very well regulated, and we are very well monitored by the regulators as well. So we need to abide to those regulations as well. To address a little bit about UI, UX, definitely, it's from Reiko. I think you speaks on behalf not only for the senior people, but this is also a problem to many people. I mean, like from the people that is quite not literate to digital. I mean, like we're talking about people in the remote areas that maybe the first time to look at the smartphones as well. So we need to reach out to them. I mean, like our research and development definitely are doing a lot of research to understand what are the customers' behaviors. One of the things that we do is that we do a guided process, meaning that people don't need to know so much about what they need to do. We will guide them on the next steps. It's something that is pretty much embedded into our system that hopefully could help the penetrations, could help people to actually not only use it, but also optimizing the use of the digital technology and tools. This is not only, again, for the senior people. This is actually a problem for many of them, because we have very segmented markets, and we serve also two sides of the community here. One are the end users. The other one are the MSMEs that we serve, in which they earn their living as well. So we need to be able to actually to reach out to both worlds as well.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Arsenio, I'd like to come to you next. There's a question here about competition, asking about how we can ensure that platforms give, I guess, equal access or don't give preferential access to certain vendors on their digital marketplaces. It's a question from John Woo Kang that's had two likes. So I think there's a lot of interest in that one. They're asking about the abuse of superior market position by some of the platforms.
Yes, indeed. It's a major concern globally because, as I said, the economies of scale and network effects make combined together, put together, would make first mover or create first mover advantage that make it difficult for competitors to come in. And when you have that monopolization taking place in a market, then of course abuse of dominance is or can be an issue. And there competition authorities like the Philippine Competition Commissioner in the Philippines their task is to ensure that the market remains competitive. And so when there are threats of mergers and acquisitions leading to monopolization, that is a big issue for a competition authority. And so what we are guarding is that the markets remain a fair play. It's the level playing field must be there, and efforts to create monopolies must be prohibited by regulators.
Excellent. Thanks very much for that, Arsenio. We're coming very close to the end of our 1 hour discussion. We've got to a lot of the questions, a lot we didn't get to. So I'm going to do a quick fire question round if I could. So I'd like one word answers from everybody, please. Do you think that the underlying shifts in consumer behavior, the shift to online, will continue once we are over the COVID-19 pandemic? Arsenio.
Sure. But I would like to say that the online platform economy can indeed catalyze inclusive growth, but we need to get the whole of government make that happen, especially in developing countries such as the Philippines.
Sure. Yasu.
Yes, I think there are going to be a permanent impact of digitalization, and I think this is there are lots of positive aspects because online platform can basically enhance the market functioning, and you know, there is a huge potential to make transaction more inclusive. So I think yeah, my answer is yes. And this is a good direction. But at the same time, I think there are lots of challenges, infrastructure and affordability of technology, cybersecurity, etc., etc. So I think as Aoki-sensei, Reiko mentioned, coordination across the agencies and the ministries, and also a partnership between private platformers and government, as well as MDB supporting this whole positive dimension. So thank you. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you. Reiko, how about you? I noticed nobody is sticking to the one word, by the way.
Yes. And I think online is going to be the norm. And it's actually going to increase the value of doing things offline. I think it's going to be a byproduct.
Thank you. Ritsky, the last word to you.
I'll start with one word: collaborations. Definitely, I think it's a key word. As much as we're contributing a lot to the economic recovery, we are nothing without the community, without the people embracing this together, and of course, government. So we need to work hand in hand to actually overcome this crisis.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much for all of your inputs. We didn't get to all of the questions, I'm afraid. Some of them I think we can answer online. Some of them were a little bit tangential to the topic, but I think we heard a lot from all of you. Thank you for a very, very rich discussion. Ritsky, Reiko, Arsenio, of course, Yasuyuki, thank you for your perspectives. Thank you, of course, to our audience. Just to let you know, the next webinar in the Asian Impact series will be just under a month from now, on the 10th of February, when our experts will be looking at the impacts of COVID-19 on cross-border flows of trade, investment, and people, and how regional cooperation and integration can help Asia and the Pacific to recover. Please join us then. We look forward to your inputs, and we look forward to hearing from another set of experts a month from now. Thank you. Have a good rest of the day.